Today I will present parts of my working paper titled AI Ethics Made in China Between Technological Promises and Labor Realities. It is not exclusively focused on COVID, but yeah, as I will show just in the next slide, it is very much linked to this. And I've also seen connections between what I'm about to talk about, especially with Max and Arif, and I will just point it out later in the hope to continue the conversation and maybe highlight another aspect, especially how this social inequality and labor relations and even function creeps could be reproduced by technologies, these platforms and algorithms. But to begin with, I would like to point out what I call the great paradox in China's tech industry at this moment. So I think we all know that China is all in for AI technologies. And the tech companies especially are selling this narrative that thanks to AI, human will be freed, liberated from tedious labor. So in the future, it will just be a techno utopia. And one of the really essential moments for this is in 2019, in this annual AI conference called World AI Conference held in Shanghai, Jack Ma, the CEO of Alibaba, held a very much anticipated debate with Elon Musk regarding AI. And in this debate, Jack Ma said that in disagreement with Elon Musk, that AI will not threaten human. On the contrary, thanks to AI, he held his hand high and said the future will be where people can work 3 days a week and 4 hours a day. But actually what's happening in China these days, it's the exactly contrary. It's the 996 work system in which especially workers in the tech industry are working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. That's 72 hours a week. And that's, you see, in great contrast with what Jack Ma is claiming. So this paradox is where I start to wonder and to investigate in this kind of work environment, work culture, then how is AI ethics conceptualized and how is it practiced and yeah, in basic such exploited environment. Maybe just to point out that it's exactly this kind of pursuit for productivity and efficiency, but not in terms of like what Max just said, the unemployment, but by overwork, by exploiting the workers furthermore. And just to go back to this, what Jack Ma said, in response to China's criticism, the public criticism towards this 996 system, he said, oh, but this is a great blessing to this workers in the Chinese industry, because many people want this opportunity for personal success, but they don't even have it. So then I further to just show this great irony, because even though Jack Ma says this workers' individual pursuit, that's not true, because in China, AI surveillance system is widely used to survey and monitor these workers. It's not out of their own motivation. They're forced, they're closely pushed to the limit of what they can do. And what's on the screen, it's basically the side from the monitor operation system that each worker's device will be closely monitored and tracked and measured, quantified in terms of in what field, what applications, what pages do they spend their time, and not just to track. They are also measured to set the target for performance, to predict and to basically push the target for these workers in terms of how they will work in their device. And this is especially aggravated since that workers during COVID are mostly work from home. So even in their home, how they work, it's because of these platforms are closely monitored. And yeah, and this is another function embedded in some of these platforms and services. This is I think maybe quite unique in China. It's called Smile to Work, check in and check out. So basically, when workers work from other locations or from home, they need to check in when they start to work. But it's not just facial recognition. They are forced to smile. And this function requires worker, it says on the top that only if they smile to the score above 50 out of 100, they can be recorded. And there's just so much complaint and criticism towards this function, which is still used by Alibaba's own software. And one social media user criticized this app, and she says that she looks like a psychopath every day after work. Already after so much working hour, she, very exhausted. She had to smile to this app just to check out. And then right after checking out, she would return to her dead face. So she called this just a distortion of humanity. And in another aspect, and not the white collar work environment, here is a tracking system for the food delivery workers in China. Basically, to use the geodata to track where they are, but also to collect all kinds of information and to measure and to predict how much time they would need, and especially to allocate the efficient time to deliver for these delivery drivers. And just because how much this is measured to the efficiency, what turned out is that a lot of delivery workers, they are driving so fast just to meet the algorithms computation, and there were a lot of traffic accidents happened in China. And these delivery workers, they are exactly the precarious workers who don't have insurance, who don't have all the social protections. And this phenomenon is recently brought also to under media spotlight, because thanks to an article written by a journalist titled "The Delivery Drivers Who Are Trapped in the Algorithm Systems." Yeah, so this is another type of this surveillance software, not in the office, but in the road. And of course, in Europe also, we are using more and more delivery food service as well. I haven't looked into what's happening in Europe, but I'm very curious of how this kind of software and algorithm is used here. How similar is it to China, and how maybe not it is. So just to also continue, here is an illustration in an article written by Nikkei Asia. It's a really great news article about this surveillance software in China. And I find this illustration very, very good, because it shows a chain of surveillance and exploitation. What I mean by this, as I've illustrated, imagine that the software developers, they're developing a software to track this office workers' performance, let's say in a food delivery company in the office. And then the software developers in this office are further developing a software to trace and to track, to push, to exploit the drivers on the street. So you really see this chain of surveillance and exploitation in the platform economy, in AI, artificial intelligence. So this is the phenomenon, and I will talk about my research. So for the past year, not just the past year, past 2 or 3 years, actually the Chinese tech companies have been stepping up effort in incorporating ethical discourse in their development of AI. And I looked at the top 20 Chinese AI companies, and 5 of them have released or issued some sort of principles, ethical principles, or reports related to this topic. And I've built a data set of all these documents. And here on the screen, you will see Tencent, together with the Tencent AI Lab, released this principles, ethical frameworks built on the kind of catchword of trustworthy AI, and the ethical framework for an intelligence era. And in the middle, we see SenseTime, which is a facial recognition startup in China, released the code of ethics for the so-called AI sustainable development. And similarly, iFlyTech, which is a natural language processing startup in China, it's partially state-owned and partially public traded, also released a report called Environment, Social, and Society and Governance Report. And on the other hand, discussions on AI ethics are actually also very lively on Chinese social media, because in China, workers cannot form their unions. They don't really have a platform to discuss this matter, but very convenient for me that there's this social media platform called Zhihu in China that's particularly favored by tech workers. It's similar to Quora, and it's a Q&A forum where people can post questions and then answer. And the research, previous research found that a lot of these users are in the tech industry. And they're also for example, they're also very educated, mostly are computer science PhDs. And so I also identified this large data set of discussions on AI ethics. And basically what I did is I combined document analysis with social media discussion analysis and digital ethnography. And here are my main findings, juxtaposing these 2 different discourses. So on one hand, the corporate AI ethics documents really showed a very positive promises of ideals such as AI for good, sustainable AI, with the assumptions that first, tech professionals in the industry, they have the incentives to fulfill these promises. And second, that simply they assume with more access to digital technologies, then the future will be good. Moreover, they have all these reports and principles demonstrated a very strong sense of technological determinism, which I'll show just in the next slide with a quote. And they very much focus, their ethical discourse very much focus on the very obvious disadvantaged groups, for example, the poor, the disabled, the old, the missing child, and so this group of disadvantaged group are the moral subjects of their ethical discourses. But on the other hand, when I look at the discussions on AI ethics on Zhihu by those tech professionals, there is a very strong pessimistic prediction of a future in which AI will become the tool for the domination of the minority, those people who have capital, over the majority, the workers. And also in this discourse, there is a sense of technological determinist view, but AI is commonly acknowledged as the major productive technology that will profoundly change power relations and social forms. And in the most extreme case, which is a quite Marxist view of, and also sense of moral realism, seeing that ethical norms and values are adaptive to the technological changes. So just to illustrate my point, here is an expert from Tencent's report titled Tech for Good. In this report, quote, Tencent says, in the past 3 decades, information technology has been like a tsunami, bringing mankind from industrial civilization to the digital society. In this drastic digitization process, the internet companies play a vital role and have huge influence. So we must define our missions, responsibilities, and choices to ensure the maximization of the real benefit of this round of technological revolution on human beings and the well-being of the digital society. Accordingly, we believe that Tech for Good contains 2 aspects. On one hand, to fully use the potential of this round of new technology, make it benefit for most people's lives, solving all sorts of traditional societies, inveterate disease and problems, promote social progress, and help mankind become stronger, happier, and have a better future in digital civilization. On the other hand, to ensure new technologies are used for good rather than abused or even for harmful purposes. Just to point it out, I find it really interesting that they want to regulate the use of technology for good. That's kind of to avoid the creep, right? They have a really very clear idea of what's good and what's wrong. And technology companies, they have the right to decide to predetermine what's good and what's bad, how it should be used. Yeah, so that's what I see as a linkage, what I found really interesting, how the creep is defined here by this very positive term, Tech for Good. Yeah, and just to show the other sides of perspectives, here are 2 quotes from Zhihu. In my research, I anonymized all the material because I did not obtain consent for this material. But to illustrate my point, one user said, because it is the strong who buy AI service and it's the weak who are harmed, how can the weak set ethical norms for the strong? The strong can use a lot of social resources and wealth, a higher group of people to argue the ethical correctness of their behavior from a professional point of view. In this non-reciprocal game situation, the weak are powerless and can only be slaughtered. What you can't get on the battlefield, you can't get at the negotiation table. Yeah, just a reminder, these people who say this, they work in the tech industry. That's important. And the second user said, history has seen no shortage of technological changes, from agrarian civilization to the machine age to the electrical age to today's information-based society. Which of these times has productivity progress been stopped because of the human factor? Instead, each time human society began to embrace new moral concepts, new ways of thinking, and new ethical values after the emergence of new technologies. So there's a really strong sense of technological determinism, also moral realism, and that's really fascinating. So just to conclude, what I wanted to highlight with my research and this phenomenon in China is that this discursive gap can really have immense harmful social consequences. Why? Because on one hand, these tech companies are promising these good futures, but these good futures will not be executed in the codes, in the design of the systems. They are not even believed by these tech workers who are, basically doing the active creation of all these systems. Yeah, on the contrary, they believe in the social relations and power relations and marginalization that's already so much in the society. And that's how this inequalities and exploitative social relations could be reproduced in this system. And the second point I want to make, which I actually did not talk too much in the previous slides is that there's, at least in Chinese cases, there's no little structure in terms of incentive, in terms of organization, or in the current R&D process for AI for good. There was a lot of debates also in China, for example, regarding the delivery workers, and media played the blame game. A lot of media articles criticized the programmers, the coders in this company, says, hey, it's your fault that you developed these softwares to push the limit of the delivery workers. But then online, these programmers, they said, it's not our fault. Our company do not give us any incentives. Our work is not evaluated by the social good. Our work is purely evaluated by how much profit it would produce. So it's not our fault. And then whose fault is it? In the end, it's the management and the capitalism. So what I wanted to highlight, the third point, which is a cliche in the field of science and technology studies, that of course technology change and social change are co-produced, and that's what I hope to confirm again with my analysis of the discourses on AI ethics. And finally, I just want to pose two questions. The first is quite a selfish question, because in my ongoing research, I would like to continue a comparative perspective, as I've highlighted, like what's happening in Europe and maybe in the US or the global, tech companies. So I want to ask, are these phenomena really Chinese unique? To what extent are they global? I mean, Google, Facebook, they are giving these amazing promises too. But what are these tech workers saying, this company? That's what I hope to learn more about in the future. And the second one, also to relate to the previous presentations, as well as to maybe bring the conversation back to a very fundamental level. I want to point out the algorithm of the capitalist system. So to what extent can we tweak the algorithms of this capitalist system in the platforms and metrics that we will be looking at? It's it might be quite a pessimistic end note, but thank you.
Thanks, Emma. Thank you.